Friends, colleagues, and business associates, and thank you so much for joining Collegiate Sports Management Group for the second in a bi-weekly series of Tuesday Sports Empowerment Series panel discussions. 2 weeks ago, we did a conversation on names, image, and likeness, NIL. After we complete this panel, Mike will tell you what's coming in the series moving forward. Very much appreciate everyone's busy schedules, recognizing the difficult, challenging times in which we live. And this goes without saying, but CSMG is extremely committed to the belief in unity and equal and fair treatment for all. So with that, we're excited to have a tremendous panel today. We'll give you some background information on our panelists. All have great accomplishments, but in the interest of time, I'm going to just focus on affiliations to give everybody a perspective as to questions that could be asked and backgrounds. First, Kris Dunbar, the commissioner of the Great Lakes Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, having been athletic director at Lake Superior State and also well-recognized four-year starting athlete at Grand Valley State in basketball. Jen Condaras, deputy commissioner and student women's administrator of the Colonial Athletic Association, with additional fantastic experience coming out of the Big East Conference and American Athletic Conference. Noreen Morris, commissioner of the Northeast Conference, 11 years entering year 12, outstanding achievements during that time, including NEC front row. So another media perspective in addition to what you might hear from the final panelists that we will announce, 25 years of intercollegiate athletic background. Also having served at Northwestern University, Conference USA, and UConn. Julie Rolash, Deputy Commissioner of the Horizon League. 20 years of experience, 5th year at the Horizon League, 16 years at the NCAA, doing a broad variety of crucial functions in that organization, and also an athlete in college, first team All-American in basketball at a conference near and dear to me, the CCIW at Millikan. Also mentioning that Noreen was also an athlete at Cornell University. And finally, Lindsay Ross, Director of Rights Acquisition at Flow Sports, 18 years of experience, primarily in the media space, but also outstanding experience at colleges and conferences at the ACC, Conference USA, and University of Miami. Lindsay headed up an important part of ESPN in terms of programming acquisitions, 18 years of experience now at Flow Sports, one of CSMG's valued partners. Finally, our moderator, my business partner, the CEO of Collegiate Sports Management Group, Mike Schreck. Fortunate to know Mike for 18 years. He will lead a very important and we think compelling discussion on women in college athletics, career paths, etc. Mike is a New York Mets executive, was a New York Mets executive, additionally tripled revenue over a 9-year period at Westwood One, and most recently an extremely well-reviewed professor at Manhattanville College, teaching global sports marketing and management. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Schreck.
Thank you, Ray, and appreciate everybody being here today. As you've just heard, we have a great panel that we're fortunate enough to have join us today. Some of the topics that we're going to touch on here are about the navigating the landscape in college athletics today, some of the challenges that these women face as they lead organizations and try to grow the overarching ecosystem of collegiate athletics. We'll talk a little bit about their careers, how they got started, and some of the challenges they've faced along the way. And then we'll get into some of the topics that are facing college athletics today, whether it be the pandemic, name, image, and likeness, some other topics that the NCAA is out in the forefront on. And so we're going to probably go about an hour today with these women. And certainly we'll be in the chat room here looking at audience questions and then having them answer some of the things that are posted there. So appreciate everybody being here today. Noreen, if we could start with you, please. You have 13 years, or you're coming up on 13 years of being the commissioner at the NEC conference and have had great success over your career. Please share a little bit with us as it relates to your career path and some of the things you do and skills you have as it relates to your career.
Great, thanks, Mike, and I appreciate CSMG putting this on, and the work that you, Ray, and Dan have put into not just this event, last week's events, and I know you're having future events. So in a time when we're all trying to stay connected and continue to grow professionally, really appreciate what you're doing. For those of you who joined, I see we're up to 88 participants. Happy to be here and give you a little bit of insight into my career. As Michael said, I've had experience both at two schools. UConn is where I got my start as an intern, and then received an offer to run their first, be their first full-time compliance administrator. From there, went to Conference USA, where I worked with Mike Slive and Britton Banoski, and then went to Northwestern for my second stint at a school. Worked under Mark Murphy, who now leads the Green Bay Packers, and Jim Phillips, who has been very instrumental at the national level when he was chairing council. And then have been in, you've given me an extra year, Michael. I'm in my 11th year now at the Northeast Conference. And so I think my experience, run the gamut of working at a school at an entry-level type position, then being a senior administrator at Northwestern, and then 2 different conferences. And so I would think that I was lucky and very fortunate to have some great role models and mentors. Pat Meiser was the first female mentor that I had. She was the associate AD at the time at UConn, and then went on for a 20-plus year career as AD at Hartford. She was a fantastic mentor for me as I came in as an intern. And then I had many other mentors that you really need to take advantage of the knowledge of the people that you're surrounded by. So Jeff Hathaway, Brenda Weir, who unfortunately passed away just before actually I took over her role at the Northeast Conference. Some really good role models. And so I would say try to surround yourself and take positions where you know that the people you're working for maybe share the same values or have the same vision that you do. And all along the way, it was a product of just good old-fashioned hard work. Putting the time in, volunteering, trying to expand your knowledge base at each place that you are. I was doing compliance at UConn, but said, hey, you guys are hosting championships, let me help. Volunteering, just trying to expand the network internally before you look to expand your network externally. If people can vouch for you and your work ethic, then when you look outward, you have those internal advocates who can help you and increasing your network and getting involved at the regional and national levels. And then the last thing I would talk about in terms of a career and building your career is just building relationships. This is a people business. We are here to serve our student athletes. And you need to be able to build relationships, just not with the student athletes, but with everybody around you. And the people that you work with, Jeff Hathaway was my boss, but now he's a colleague. Then he was on the council when I was chairing the council. So, you go from mentee to mentor and back and forth. All the people that you meet along the way are going to help you as you move forward. So just recognize that, you shouldn't burn any bridges and continue to think about, building relationships from an authentic way, but knowing that every person that you touch along the way could be a potential advocate for you in the future. So those are 3 things when Dan kind of presented the original question, which I may have strayed from, is, how do you position yourself for success? And I think it's just a matter of hard work, looking for the opportunities, and then building relationships along the way.
Perfect. Thank you, Noreen. And I apologize for giving you an extra year. And you called me Dan, so we're even now. It's perfect.
No, I called you Mike first, and then Ray and Dan.
No, thank you for that great perspective. Julie, you've had a wonderful career. During this process, we learned about you playing college basketball. Give the group some of the obstacles and biggest challenges that you've had to overcome, whether it was at the NCAA, at the Horizon League, or just in life in general.
Sure. Well, I couldn't shoot a left-hand layup. No, I'm teasing. Hands down, just to get right to it. And before I do, though, first I want to thank CSMG, all of you, for participating on the panel, and for Mike, you and Ray, and your leadership for doing this. I think it's great. We all need to stop figuring out how we're going to have competition again this fall and take a step back and think about why we're doing what we're doing. So we appreciate this. And Noreen, I want to give you public praise for your statement on unity. I've been on calls already this morning. It's been emotional. So I just really appreciate everyone coming together, and we feel for you, we're with you, and we are going to figure out how to move forward together. So not a good transition, but I'm going to try to segue back to your question, Mike. And the biggest challenge I've had was, without a doubt, getting fired in a very public job. So I'll make it interesting for everyone here at the beginning. And that's where sports, it is about resilience. Even what we're talking about today is about resilience and how to move forward. But after spending 15 years at the NCAA, which I loved almost every minute of it, maybe not the last few, it was an incredible place to be, as our conference offices, as I've learned. And when you do, and I think I've become that person who talks about getting fired because I'm comfortable doing it. And I call it my involuntary transition. It happens. It's going to happen. Hopefully not to everyone, but when it does happen, as Noreen said, we are in the people business. And that's why I chose to stay in college sports. And that was, now 7 years ago, because of the outpouring of support from men, from women, of all different walks of life, saying, hey, you believe in college sports, you made an impact. We hope you stay in the business instead of taking a left turn and figuring out an entirely different career path. And that's why I continue to stay in. One, as you said, I think you gave me too much credit in my college career, but I loved sports. My coach remains one of the top 5 people who's had an impact on me, continues to. My kids even know my coach. She just is an incredible role model. So that's, to me, it's transformative. And I think even now, as we're seeing, it can be transformative with social change, not just the individual, but society. So to be a part of that is a privilege. And then, in terms of how do you overcome it, it's, as Noreen said, it is about the people, and it's being willing to ask for help, and being willing to ask for jobs, and being willing to be mentored and told where you need to get better and where you need to improve, and listening to that advice. It's hard sometimes, but every time I've done it, I've ended up in a better place. And that is, the piece on mentors. I've been fortunate to have both women and men mentor me. And I was told a while ago that if I want to really continue to advance my career, I need to start having mentors who don't look like me. And I need to mentor people that don't look like me. So I really appreciated that advice, and I really tried to figure out how to do that in a real, authentic, genuine way. And sometimes I've done well, and sometimes I haven't. But I think that is why this world that we all work in college sports is so special, because we do have so many different people and viewpoints, and yet we all are unified on trying to offer these incredible opportunities to young people. So I'm not sure I answered your question either, but in a roundabout way, I think I addressed the biggest obstacle, which was obviously losing your job and position you love, and then figuring out how do you pivot, and how do you get back up, and then how do you learn from that and become even better. So that's what I'm still trying to figure out sometimes.
Good. Well, I appreciate that, Julie, and thanks for sharing your perspective there. Kris, running an organization like you do, you've learned a lot of great traits along the way. What are some of the things that you learned that you now instill in your staff members today as you continue to help them grow in their careers?
Well, I guess don't be afraid of new challenges. I mean, that's the door just opens up so much when you go through a door that you're kind of afraid to go through and not sure that you're ready and have all these questions. I think, like both Noreen and Julie have said, you surround yourself with good people, people that you can rely on. You can do just about anything. I think the relationships that you build along the way just helps you get further in your career, but as a person you grow too. I've learned a lot of what not to do and I've learned a lot of what to do. So you're learning from every situation. Not every leader is a great leader, but you can learn from every single one that you've come into place with. I think for me, building a team, well, I was a coach for quite a while, and I think that's the biggest approach that I take to every setting that I go into. It's caring about the people that you work with, making a family type of environment. We're fortunate at a conference office that it's pretty small. We only have 4 full-time staff, so it's a little bit easier than, say, being the head of when I was an athletic director. But I still think that personal touch that you give to your staff, to me, it was important that the staff knew who I was, knew who my family was, came to my house, and I did that as a coach too. And I didn't learn that right away as a coach. At first, it was all business, and it was just trying to establish rules, but just even today, I had one of my former players over to my house. Her daughter came over and was working on some math with my son, and we just sit and talk and reminisce. And so, just for me, it's creating an environment where people feel comfortable enough to go talk to you. And I think I learned a lot from coaching, and a lot on how to develop those relationships. You don't always have to be the person who's in charge doesn't have to be the one that's making all the tough decisions. You make them together, and then more people buy into those decisions as you communicate those throughout your whole staff. But your staff feels like they're a part of those decisions as well. So to me, leadership just isn't about leading. It's about bringing the people with you into making those decisions, and they lead with you at the same time. So I just think you get better buy-in, and you get better participation, and you are developing former leaders. One of my associate commissioners just took a job in the WIAC. She's becoming a commissioner. I'm so excited for Danielle that she was offered that position. I hope it has a little bit to do with mentoring with me, but probably not. She's just a great person, and she's ready for that position. And that's what I hope I can bring to my staff, is get them to where they want to go, but also feel like they're respected and empowered and appreciated while they're still working in a department with me.
Great, Kris, and thank you for that. And I'm sure some of that new job from your former colleague has a lot to do with you. So appreciate the perspective there. Lindsay, you and I have gotten to know each other fairly well over the last, let's call it 4+ years. And I always admire how you balance the work-family life. And you do a great job with it. And certainly would love to get your perspective on some of the roles you've had and how you do navigate and balance that.
Yeah, thank you. It's, first of all, I echo what has been stated before of thank y'all for even having this opportunity for young people and everyone alike to hear kind of advice from folks. I sit back and wish I had it probably a long time ago as well, to tell my younger self some things to navigate. The balance of life is difficult, and I would be lying to say that I have it all figured out. And certainly, I think Julie actually heard a mom moment of mine through this pandemic where I wasn't exactly the best mother balancing this. But I will say that in echoing what Noreen and Julie said earlier about surrounding yourself with really good people, from both a mentoring aspect as well as growth, the most important thing is to have people around you that will challenge you and don't think necessarily or look necessarily like you, and that are constantly challenging you to be a better person as well as a better colleague and a better manager and all of those things from a growth perspective on a daily basis. You don't always want yes people around you. You want people that will challenge you. And then that helps you to listen to others along the way. For me, I had some great advice early on that, give yourself room to forgive yourself, and certainly allow yourself the space to dive in where you need to dive in. Being a parent or a friend has certainly within the role of college athletics has been challenging, but it allows me now to listen better to those that are around me. I have a better understanding. And then I get checked at home when my husband tells me to stay in my own lane. So I understand that space too, but it's a daily challenge. I think the best advice for anyone is to surround themselves with people that will make you think and make you better. And I've been fortunate to have those, and many of which are on the call. I mean, that's another thing that, don't lose sight of this being a small world, that, keep positive interactions with all of the people that you work with on a daily basis. They will become, they may be your boss and in one place and colleague and peer and advisor in another place. I mean, I've worked with many of these women on this panel in vastly different forms, and certainly while I was at ESPN in a different light, and at Flow now, and knock on wood, trying to work with some of the others on this panel as well, in the Flow sports world. So again, it's caring. It all comes down to caring about people and trying to make yourself better on a daily basis, and allowing yourself freedom and forgiveness where we're not always going to be perfect on a daily basis. So that's probably, these women have allowed me that forgiveness too. So leaning on each other.
Great. Thank you for that perspective, Lindsay. Jen, you're the definition of loyalty. Okay. I've had friends of ours that are mutual tell me that. I know you've been loyal to Joey in certain places that he's been the commissioner at. Talk a little bit about your career and how you define loyalty.
Thank you, Mike. And just like everyone else had said, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you, Ray, as well, and for putting this great programming together. I, similar to a couple of my fellow panelists, cut my teeth in the business and compliance, and was able to really get a large amount of responsibility and experience early on, because compliance touches just about everything within an athletic department, whether at an institution or at a conference office. And I was really fortunate to work with some great people. I had my graduate degree experience at West Virginia and was a GA in the compliance office there for 2 years. And then went on to work at Georgia Tech. I worked for Mary McElroy, who really gave me a great opportunity. She was a strong woman, still is a very strong woman, and wanted me to be able to follow in her footsteps, and really allowed me to get out in front of coaches and higher level staff early on. Similar to Noreen, what she had said earlier, given the opportunity to go volunteer in a championship and make the best of your time wherever you are to gain that experience. And I was able to continue that good fortune with future jobs when I went to the Big East, and then on to the American, and then back to the new Big East. And just the ability to be able to fill in where needed allowed me to branch out of compliance and work with the SWAs in the league, and then eventually with championships, and most recently with women's basketball. And Joey's also allowed me to continue to develop in that regard as well. I feel I am a loyal person, and I feel like it has helped me be successful in my career. I feel by being loyal and being a good friend and a good colleague to folks that you're able to expand your network triple, quadruple, because you have people that know that they can count on you, and you can now count on them. And we work outside the lines, right? So we don't need to be secretive. We want to share ideas. We want to share goals, and college athletics is not cookie cutter, and the way you get to certain end goals may not be the same, but we're all about sharing. And I think especially now in today's world with what we're going through, it's just more important than ever to be able to lean on people and let them help you, and make sure you're reaching out to help them as well.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. Kris, I'm going to turn this one back to you. At the top here, Ray mentioned that I've been teaching at the graduate level, Manhattanville College, for a couple of years now. And what I've seen is an increase in female students as it relates to getting sports management degrees. Talk a little bit about the trends, the uptick, and even some of your peers that are now getting commissioner roles that are females. Where do you see this going?
I see it only improving more and more. I think as females honestly embrace this environment or this type of working environment, because it's not easy. You're working nights, weekends. Everybody who knows who's in this athletics world, it's unconventional. It's not a 9 to 5, and it's not conducive to what you need to do with your family. I mean, it's a grind, and there's certain times a year, especially when you're on a campus or you're working with a lot of sporting events. It's nights, weekends. It's not people. It's fun. People are always like, oh, well, you must have your summer off, and they think there's all. You just go and watch sporting events and just kind of hang out and have fun. But no, it's a tough work environment to live in. So I do think that the more, and I always tried this on my campus when I was an athletic director, was to go over to the sports marketing department, talk to those professors, and get those students engaged with the athletic department. Start seeing what it's like. I think also as you get more high-profile females in those positions, it's young women feel like they have a chance to get to that level. Before, when you didn't see a face that was familiar to yours, kind of didn't even think about it. I know I didn't. I'm going to turn 50 here in July, so it ages. Where my age kind of comes into play, and I never thought of being a conference commissioner. Shoot, I didn't think of being a conference commissioner when I was in coaching. There wasn't any. There were no females to even look at and think, oh yeah, I could do that. So I do think as more females enter these, be it in athletics or business or whatever it might be, enter and you're a face now, you can dream about being that face because it makes sense, because you've seen people like that, like you. And that's what we have to do more and more of, and get outside of a box of what we think who we think go into those jobs. Anybody can go into these jobs, but you have to feel like you can do it and get there. I was fortunate enough when I was coaching, and I was coaching at Lake Superior State. The president of that university was a female, and she and I had a great relationship. We loved basketball. She played basketball. So I had also taken on the senior women administrator role, and knew eventually I wanted to get into the administrative side, but the position opened up a little earlier than I anticipated, and she thought it was the right time for me. And it was that scary door that I wasn't sure I wanted to go through at that point, because I was really comfortable coaching and I enjoyed it. But there was only one other female athletic director in our league, and it just, really, athletic director? Oh, yeah, I think I can do that. So I see a trend going upward. I mean, I don't know about a glass ceiling. I think you smash through glass ceilings because you've got people who are smashing through them before you, and then there's another one, and another person goes through it. I mean, I see the trend definitely going upward. But I think you have to see people like you in those positions, or have some really great dreams and some good people around you to help you get to where you want to go. But yeah, I've been in 2 positions, an athletic director and a commissioner, that I would never dreamed of when I was in college. And I'm very fortunate that I'm not alone. I've got other females like that around me. And I feel like it's just really the start. I think that you're going to see more and more as women become more comfortable and feel empowered to go after these types of positions.
Thank you, Kris.
Mike,
Appreciate that.
Mike,
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I have a funny anecdote to answer your question, similar to Kris, but it was 10 years ago. I say that because I was pregnant with my oldest. So it was a little over 10, because she's 10. And I was head of enforcement, invited to the SEC athletics directors meeting. And this was when the current commissioner was their deputy commissioner. And Mike Slive, who's passed, was the commissioner. And I mean, you guys get the irony here, right? Head of enforcement invited to SEC conference meeting. So here I am at the table, and it's all of I get invited in the room. They'd already been meeting, obviously, so I'm on the agenda. So they bring me in the room when it's time to talk about enforcement, because I'm new to the enforcement scene. And they go around the table and introduce all of themselves. Of course, I knew a lot of them, at least of them, but they say their name, and it was every athletics director and every deputy. And it was all men and only one minority of more than 20, right? Because there are more than 10 SEC schools. And it was David Williams, who was also passed, but was a real force and a leader at Vanderbilt. So they go around the whole room, get to me, and I'm like 7 months pregnant at this point, probably my last trip. And I, of course, introduced myself, and then I said, "And where's all the women?" it was just silence. And I was joking, but not really, because I think you have to have a little levity sometimes to raise awareness. And then I made a joke that I brought one with me since I knew I was having a girl. So I was trying to balance out the table a little bit. And then a few people chuckled, and I realized they weren't really there for me to do my stand-up routine. I needed to get to the agenda. But fast forward, and within the last few months, we just saw Candace Lee named athletics director at Vanderbilt. It's the first African-American female to lead an SEC school. I mean, so and that's in a short time. And it actually was 8 years ago. I was pregnant with the second, but talk about major change to their credit as a conference and a league and how they've promoted that. But I think across the country, we're starting to see that. Noreen is in really good company with some amazing women commissioners. When she goes to the meeting now, Noreen, I don't know how many women, but isn't it more than 10?
Enough to have a line at the ladies' room.
There you go. All right.
But yes, 10.
But I guess my point is I do think we're trending in the right direction, but I also think bringing some awareness through levity at times can also be effective.
Yeah, Julie, and to that point, there was a great article written probably about 6 to 8 months ago or so about that trend as it relates to female athletic directors and female commissioners. And so that certainly has been great, and appreciate you jumping in there. Noreen, let's turn our attention a little bit to the day in the life here. And pandemic aside for a second, what are some of the challenges that you have faced or are facing currently as you continue to grow the NEC brand?
So pandemic aside, I don't know if I even remember life before that. It's been a long 2 months. But I think in any commissioner role, your job is to serve a membership. Ours is 11 strong, that have a lot of different missions, different priorities. And as a commissioner, you are charged with trying to lead that group together collectively. So building consensus and recognizing and identifying those areas that are important for the league to take hold of and to commit to, and to try to get them to move together as a group. That they are, you cannot be successful as a league if everyone's not bought into the vision. So while it's difficult to do, strategic planning is huge for a conference. We just passed our second iteration of a strategic plan in our conference, and I'm proud to say that there's only 4 goals within that strategic plan, and one of them is a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have really taken a stance that we need to do more around that area, and in today's world, obviously that is more evident than ever. And so our student athletes, I was on a call on Sunday night with our student athlete advisory committee, and they pushed us to make a statement. Julie, you referenced our unity statement, and so I took the student athlete input, worked with my staff and with our membership, and put together that unity statement. And it really does support what we've done as a conference. In the last 2 years, we've had the theme of unity around the MLK Day, and have done a lot of programming in addition to a diversity, equity, inclusion summit for our membership last spring. But to talk a little bit about what Kris was talking about, after we released that statement, we had a staff meeting by Zoom. We do them 3 times a week. And we talked about what's happening currently in our country. And I had one staff member who, when I said, what are y'all thinking? And you saw her statement, what are our next steps? And she was open and comfortable enough to tell me she thought our statement didn't go far enough, and that we needed to be a little more aggressive in our approach. So the fact that, one, she was comfortable in having that conversation made me proud as a leader that you can create that culture. But then we had a conversation about, okay, tell me what we can do better in the future, and let's work together. And we have some action steps that we'll present to our ADs and SWAs on our call later today, and how to take our next step. We had previously had Nevin Capel. She was going to come into each of our campuses next year and speak with our student athletes and our coaches and administrators. She is one of the most effective consultants I've seen in the space of diversity and equity. But we're going to have to pivot a little bit because, in person and travel might not be possible next year. But all that to say is, as a conference, to loop back to your question, Michael, is you have to understand, how is it you can pull 11 schools together, have the same vision, and then implement plans and actions that they understand, they appreciate, they value, and they're committed to moving forward. And that's easier said than done in some areas. You talk about media rights, that gets real complicated. In some cases, it's really hard to get everyone together. In our case, it was simple, more simple than I had anticipated when we started the NEC Front Row. But again, that's getting buy-in and getting everyone to understand you're better together than you are as an individual. And I think that theme really plays out in so many other ways. So I'll stop there and let you move on to the next question, because I'll ramble on as long as you let me.
No, it's great. Everybody wants to hear your perspective, and it's extremely valuable. And congratulations, everything you're doing at the NEC. Jen, as we live through the pandemic here, your day-to-day is constantly pivots and challenges. And you came out as a conference today and talked about an extreme flexibility model as it relates to Olympic sports. Just share with the group some of the thoughts that went into that and what the CAA is doing to kind of be out at the forefront of that.
Yes, and I apologize for the background noise. Murphy's Law, right, where the landscaping happens to be in my neighborhood when it's time for this panel. Yes, we've been meeting a lot with our athletic directors and SWAs and trying to determine what is going to be best for our conference, knowing that we have a lot of challenges, not just financially, but I believe our membership is over 8 or 9 states. And then we also have the CAA football side, which add another couple of states to the mix. So in having these conversations, especially as it relates to the Olympic sports, we wanted to be able to set our institutions up to have the flexibility to do what was going to be within their limits and not put institutions at a disadvantage. Northeastern is in a state right now that has a quarantine issue when returning to the state and may or may not be able to play conference games. And we've got institutions in New York. And then the challenge is trying to have as much equity as possible when our states go from Massachusetts down to South Carolina, and College of Charleston is already in a state that's in phase 2, where some institutions aren't even in phase 1 yet. So this model allows institutions to have a lot of flexibility, and we know the number of games that our institutions are going to be able to participate in each of their sports is also going to vary. And by allowing them to have more regional competition, feel safer about putting their student athletes on a bus for 2 to 3 hours as opposed to an airplane and then potentially in a hotel room, we knew that was important. And so as a conference, we wanted to come together to show that support and had complete buy-in from all of our institutions. So now we're trying to go through the same exercise for championships and determine what's going to be in our best interest to have a safe environment for our student athletes, also keeping in mind that we want to have as much of a student athlete experience as possible, knowing that the regular season is going to look much different than it has in years past.
Yeah, great, Jen. And thank you for providing that insight to us. Congratulations on making that announcement earlier. Lindsay, you've had an extremely difficult job the last 2 months with the pandemic, in that you're used to acquiring, live sports content, and we haven't had live sports content in quite some time here. How are you guys managing what that looks like? And then ultimately, take us a little bit down the road of, you've been an advocate to get more women's sports on your network. And what does that look like in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So pandemic aside, to start off, Flow Sports has been a company that I'm really excited that I'm a part of now. But it grew up organically serving the underserved sports. And quite honestly, the whole premise behind kind of what Flow Sports believes in is that the live events are great and certainly impactful and necessary, but it's about the surrounding content and the storytelling of the athletes and their journeys, and from beginning to end. So it's not enough to show up for just a championship and walk away. And so that has lended itself to, during this last 3-ish months of our life without live events, really allowing us to figure out how can we be that partner that we say we are, to support the engagement of fans without live sports. So immediately, stay-at-home orders kind of rocked the nation early in March, and it wasn't but a couple of weeks, maybe not even that long, that we turned around and launched a Colonial 24/7 channel for fans to engage in their content immediately. Thanks to Jen and certainly her staff at the Colonial. And so it's one of those things that we kind of were built to help and certainly at least maneuver through these times to support our rights holders the way that we know we can. To the second part of your question, as far as supporting female sports, the nice thing about being in the digital space is, and again, I've come from the linear side as well, the nice thing about being in the digital space is that you can support all rights holders and all sports at all levels equally. That there's no shelf space that you're going to run out of for support. So it allows you to independently look at that rights holder and figure out what's right and what's best for them and their constituents and their fans. It's not necessarily about flow. It's not necessarily about what we believe the subscribers or the fans are after. It's supporting the rights holders and identifying ways that we can create content around their events. And in this case, it's how can we support, kind of in moving forward, how can we support institutions and conferences in a way to make them produce content more effectively, more efficiently. Budgets right now are being constricted, and certainly there's a lot of question marks out there. So how can we jump in as a partner? Obviously, rights fees are important to partners these days. The media piece is extremely important, especially if there's events that we won't have fans that can go. But also, how can we step in and support the rights holders? How can we help produce things that maybe students aren't there to produce? Create content on our end with, our softball vertical is one of our strongest verticals. And it does, again, it's not at the expense of another vertical, which is awesome. You're not waiting for basketball to end before you're starting to tell, the lacrosse story. That those kind of live 365 days independently of each other, and can be supported year round. So hopefully that answers your question. But again, for us, it's it's how can we jump in and support our partners and future partners.
And Lindsay, you guys at Flow have done a really good job of that in supporting all your partners, and most importantly, getting a variety of women's and men's sports national exposure, which we're all extremely grateful for. Kris, let's turn our attention to another gear for a second. Unfortunately, we're in a time now where several institutions are starting to cancel sports, and sometimes they lose a team. What involvement does the conference office have in some of those decisions?
Really not much in regard to if a school really has to make that decision. One of the things that the Division II commissioners did is we tried to get ahead of that, because we saw that that might be something that Division II institutions, decisions that they would have to make. So we tried to find something that unified kind of the hurt across all of the members, but could save them money without costing them to lose sports, because we all know that enrollment is a major part of athletics and how athletics is utilized on Division II campuses. So what we did right away was we did a survey with athletic directors and talked about reduction of athletic contests. And what would that look like? What would be feasible to still give it a good student athlete experience, but also know that we could cut some significant costs on campuses just temporarily, just for 1 year, just going into this 2021 season. So schools wouldn't have to make that decision to cut sports. And so far it's worked really well. The Division II President's Council passed a proposal a couple weeks ago with about a 25% reduction of games for all sports. Some are around 20%, some are a little 33%, but mostly right around that 25 to 30% reduction. So we were really trying to avoid that, because we did see quite a few schools in Division I having to make that decision. And who knows, the state still hasn't come out with all of their budgets across yet for what institutions are going to receive for funding. So we still could see some of that, but we tried to avoid it. But answering specifically, when a school drops a sport, it can really affect the conference negatively. You have to have a certain amount of sports to sponsor it, to have a championship. And if you don't hit that number, ours in Division II is 6. You lose sponsorship, so you lose funding from the NCAA. You could lose a championship because of that, and your members who continue to have that sport might have to look to at other institutions. So it affects the whole conference, but it really is an institutional decision.
And Mike, if I could,
Please.
That's been a conversation in our league over time. In fact, we've had schools drop sports only to add them back. And one of the reasons being, and I've talked about this with my presidents as a whole, because a number of our schools, we're Division I, but many of our schools are enrollment driven. And so if you look at if you do an analysis of your athletics department and you do an analysis of the number of student athletes that come in, the amount of aid that they're receiving from the institution, whether it's athletics or otherwise, and then the amount they're actually paying on their own, I think you'll find generally that most Olympic sports are revenue generating, and that those student athletes attend school and they're paying more to attend than they might be receiving athletics aid, especially when you're talking about Olympic sports. That's not true, obviously, for the head count sports, but that's something that I've been working with our athletic directors and some of the presidents to say, you may want to look at it another way, because rather than seeing athletics as a cost, you can see it as a revenue opportunity, and in this case, an enrollment opportunity. So that's one thing. If you're on campus and you're getting pressure, that might be one way to look at it and say, hey, you know what? We're actually attracting our coaches are out recruiting students that wouldn't otherwise come to our institution. And we're actually generating revenue in many cases.
Thank you for Noreen and Kris. Those were great. Julie, let's go to a different topic here for a minute. Name, image, and likeness. We did a panel on it a couple weeks ago. We'd love your perspective as it relates to name, image, and likeness, and what that means for female athletes going forward.
Yeah, that I don't know if everyone saw the study. It was published on Athletics Director U, and they didn't ask me to plug it, by the way, but I found it fascinating because it really opened my eyes from the old school notion of how can student athletes monetize their name, image, likeness to a much more modernized approach in terms of capitalizing on their social media personas. And that article had done some research and essentially said if today it were okay or permissible for student athletes to monetize their name, image, likeness under NCAA rules, it listed the top 25 student athletes in terms of what the analytic study believed each student athlete could realize in 1 year. And you had some of the big name football players that you would suspect in the top 5 with significant 6 figures. We had a Cleveland State, who's in the Horizon League, tennis player as number 20 on this list, just under $60,000 per year. It was projected she could make off of her name, image, likeness, primarily because she has other ventures, but she has a very robust social media presence that includes being a collegiate tennis player as part of her persona. So people would pay her because of her wide reach to market their products. To me, that was very eye-opening. And even just within our league, and I'll get to your gender question, but within our league, that I think helped our athletics directors, our presidents and chancellors to realize this is not simply a Power 5 issue. And when the NCAA was dealing with sports wagering, and now we have so many states, especially in our Midwestern footprint, where sports wagering is legal. Where I live in Indiana, you can do nearly everything, including in venue. So lots of concerns about the integrity of sport, and we had focus on that. And now we've seen, it's almost as if, of course, we don't have sport happening right now. That's still on the list, but this focus towards NIL, and as Noreen said, when we're not talking about COVID-related challenges, in my view, right next on the list of our big issues for the next 12 months is how to educate our student athletes, our constituents, our boosters on what's okay, what's not okay, and then how to start to prepare for what is going to be a very new world. How does that affect female athletes versus male athletes? I think right now what we're seeing is there's still more opportunity from an awareness standpoint, right? I mean, this is all obvious from a high profile sports standpoint for male athletes, if you were to break it down, to make more money than female athletes. Where I've heard some questions, how does that come into play from a Title IX standpoint? And everything I've seen from the NCAA working group is there's a pretty clear, I would say, directive that institutions are not supposed to be involved in any way in trying to bring these opportunities to student athletes. But then they do have to walk a delicate line of making sure they're educated, maybe helping them vet them, helping them find an agent if need be to negotiate the deal. So there is going to be some level of needed, I think, institutional involvement instruction. But in terms of somehow triggering Title IX implications, if they can somehow separate that money from in any way funneling through the institution, which I think we will successfully be able to figure that out, I think that's somewhat of a guardrail, but I don't know that we've completely figured out, are there other Title IX implications that are going to come into play? So I don't know if your question was going down the Title IX path or more just the overall equity, but I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about is some element of free market. And some athletes are going to be more marketable than others, some because they are female, some because they're male, some because they're a really elite athlete, some because they might not be a great athlete, but they have an incredible side business that they're going to be able to really exploit in a positive way by linking it to their athletics prowess. So I think that that's how the market will play out. I'm personally not troubled by that. I'm more troubled by the potential abuses that are going to happen that affect that proverbial level playing field that we're all trying to chase after.
Sure. And
And
Julie,
Mike-
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think what Julie said was 100% correct, and I echo her sentiments. I, at first, was somebody that really couldn't get past the potential abuses that I know are still going to be a factor and could still come. But it wasn't really until a conversation that we'd had even with our presidents about the possibilities that Julie noted. And it's such an opportunity for our student athletes like they've never had before. And she's right, it is going to be up to them. And we do have a responsibility to help educate, but especially with female student athletes, just to make their mark out there and be creative and just take advantage of that opportunity in the right way, I think is really going to be eye-opening and really, I think, something phenomenal potentially for our female student athletes.
I
Yeah,
agree.
thank you for
When-
weighing in on that, Jen. Go ahead, Kris.
My one experience that I had as a coach, I had a basketball player who came from a small town, and she wanted to start her own camp. She wanted to run a camp for the kids in her area, and she made this whole thing, and her name was on it. And I had to call her and tell her, you can't run a camp. And she's like, what do you mean I can't run a camp? Well, you can't. She said, I just want to do something for my community. I'm like, well, you can do it, but you can't get paid. Now, if you go work for your high school basketball coach, now you can get paid because it's under that person's name, not yours. So I do think a lot of this stuff is long overdue and makes a lot of common sense, just because stopping these student athletes from having opportunities because they're athletes at a collegiate institution. I'm really glad to see that we're making some progress with this and allowing them more opportunities, be it male or female, to use their talents that they have worked so hard at, and be able to profit off of those. So I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I hope that it's the benefit that I think it can be.
Appreciate that, Kris. So we're coming up on an hour of the panel. We're going to go a few more questions and then be mindful and respectful to everybody's time. So I'm actually going to field a question from the audience that just came in, and I'm going to read it here, and then I'll direct it to anybody that wants to take it here. It says, empowering female professionals in college sport is absolutely a priority. What systematic approach is being taken or built to guide female graduates in the right direction?
I can feel that from a systematic standpoint. Is for the past number of years, I've been co-chair of the NCAA Gender Equity Task Force, and we have worked in concert with the board. It's a long name, Committee to Promote Cultural Diversity and Equity, CB something or other, some acronym. But anyway, we have been working diligently at the NCAA level from the Division I, II, and III perspective, because it's an association-wide group, to create some programming at the NCAA level. One is to try to put together a database of all female minorities who have gone through NCAA funded or sponsored programs. So anything from women leaders to MOYA to NCAA professional development, and have a database that institutions can access to say, we have a position open, we're looking for someone up and coming, or someone who's a little more tenured. Give us an example, or give us some names of people who may have been through your programming. It's not a certification that they are, qualified, but it certainly shows that they have made the first steps to try to improve their professional standing. We have also actually just started to have a relationship with the graduate programs, sport management programs across the country, to try to create a partnership so that, one, we can help with the curriculum. So how best can we train the next generation of athletic administrators to help with programming, with case studies, and then to work with those master's programs in trying to do some placement and networking. So that's at the ground level now, but we hope we're going to build that out. So there's a couple things that we've done. That's just some examples. So we've been hard at work for the last 7 years, and again, it's divisions 1, 2, and 3, and we have partnered also with the Committee on Women Athletics and MOIC, so that we could do some joint efforts, not only for women, people of color, but most specifically women of color, who are the most underrepresented in both administration and coaching.
Thank you, Noreen. Appreciate that. Julie, let's go to you for a second. There's been a lot of rumblings and certain people speaking about the Power Five breaking away from the NCAA over time. One, you were at the NCAA, and two, you're at a large mid-major conference now. How does that affect somebody who's sitting in your shoes today?
Well, as Noreen said, it's hard to think about anything but COVID. We understand, though, that we need to also be focused on the macro strategic issues, and we certainly are. I mean, I know that issue was on the table, what, Noreen, as part of when the governance restructure happened with the NCAA multiple years ago now. And I think that we got to a good place, a reasonable compromise, where the Autonomy Five certainly are recognized and have a very strong weighted position affecting key matters. So I think that was a recognition of the role they play, while also, it's not my metaphor, but I've heard it several times. There is a desire to keep all of us under the big tent. I don't know if that was a David Burstism, Noreen, or a longtime vice president of Division I for the NCAA, but there's an effort and a recognition that, similar to all these other issues we're talking about, it's okay that we're all not the same from the way we fund our athletics program, but what's our value system? What does it mean to be in Division I? Or with Kris's case, Division II's done an incredible job, as has Division III, where I came from, I think, of having a true identity about why those institutions choose Division II or choose Division III. Well, similarly in Division I, our schools have made that choice from a funding standpoint, from a commitment standpoint, from a priority and profile standpoint of the role athletics is going to play for their institution. And so when I see that, I mean, does it give us pause? Of course it gives us pause. However, like Noreen, I'm on calls literally multiple hours a day with folks from Power Five schools. We're collaborating on COVID issues. We're collaborating on safe play issues. We're collaborating on NIL issues. You saw mid-major ADs and commissioners leading that effort alongside the Autonomy Five ADs and commissioners. So I know that that's a sexy headline. What I see happening, though, is not that. I see the Division I leaders working together because they recognize right now there's more power together than trying to have some sort of break off, if you will. And then just to get way down in the weeds for a second, so much happens at the national office from an administrative standpoint, like the Gender Equity Task Force Noreen just explained. That's 7 years in the making, attacking an incredibly important issue. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have another organization that's doing the exact same thing created and then be charged with tackling all of these critical value issues. And when you get down to the money, the football conferences are already funding, the money stays within the football conferences. I think we all know this, but the basketball contract for the NCAA funds all of enforcement, for football included, funds the Gender Equity Task Force. Men's basketball, ironically, funds all of the administrative functions, nearly all, that are provided to all Division I member institutions and conferences. So I don't even think it'd be a good financial decision if anybody asked my opinion on that either.
Yeah, and it also, the money from the Division I men's basketball tournament funds all of Division I, II, and III championships. So it's not just an impact on Division I, it would be an impact on the whole association. If in fact, the Power Five decided to leave and create their own structure, what happens to the basketball tournament, the value of that media rights? And frankly, as Julie said, I think there is definitely, we have more in common than we have different. It just, the difference is the dollar figure, which is significantly different. But in terms of the value structure and the reason that we're in this business, we have that in common. So I I personally, I don't think that that's going to happen, and that we've provided the outlet for the structure for the Power 5 or the A5 to have a little more control in certain areas and have more weighted votes in certain areas. So I think we've done enough at this point to allow us to stay together.
Yeah, appreciate that. And Noreen, you mentioned media rights value. Lindsay, let's turn it over to you, where you've been doing deals with Division II conferences, Division III conferences, all the way up through the Power 5. Let's talk a little bit about the value of those conferences and you guys' approach to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as Noreen and Julie were just talking, certainly we understand the impact overall of what that would do, the Power 5 breaking off. But what I'm excited to see is the trend of everyone finally being able to monetize all tiers of their live events and their sports, all of those rights from Olympic sports that previously hadn't been monetized at the school and conference level in the past. So as most of you are aware, we just announced in the last couple of weeks a partnership with both the Pac West and the Gulf South, 2 Division II conferences. The nice thing about, and I stated previously, is we don't have to compare rights holders against one another. Our mission is to fight for sports that are underserved, and there's a passionate community of fans behind it, and we are willing to create content, support the live rights, and rally the communities that are passionate about that sport in a vertical system to where they can support that individual sport soup to nuts, all year round. I could talk. So it's been really exciting, kind of the growth and allowing rights holders to be able to monetize those rights, regardless of the size they believe they are in comparison to the other their other peer leagues or even Power 5. I have felt in previous roles before that my hands were tied and I couldn't necessarily support specific rights holders based on their size. I think my very first deal at Flow Sports was with the MEAC conference and supporting their Olympic sports. And so again, it energizes me to see fan bases get coverage and support that kind of we've talked about Power 5 have received in the past.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective, Lindsay. So we're going to start to wrap it up here, and I'm just going to ask the panelists to provide one last thought to the group here. And I'll start with Jen. Jen, if you could provide the group on here today some advice about getting into collegiate athletics, what would you share with the group in the last minute here?
Yes, thank you. I have really enjoyed my career in college athletics. I think there are so many different opportunities, no matter what your background may be, whether it's you wanted to be a lawyer or marketing or sports information, if you wanted to be a writer, for example. I think there's just such an opportunity for people in this industry, and I'm excited to see more and more former student athletes become a part of it. And I am excited for some of the programming that has been developed over the last couple of years, especially at the national office, where we're trying to get more student athletes involved to have that as a career opportunity, and especially for minority student athletes. I think it's more prevalent in basketball right now, but I'm optimistic that we'll be able to find more ways to incorporate some of our Olympic sports into some of that programming as well. So if anyone has interest in sports, I think it's just such a great opportunity. And the good thing is we're all a part of collegiate sports, obviously, but there are other levels within either collegiate sports or at the professional level, high school level, that there's just so many different career options for people. So I think it's definitely been a good career path for myself, and has really opened up a lot of opportunities for me personally and professionally.
Kris, what areas of the business do you see the most opportunity for either entry level or mid-level jobs right now?
I'd say don't be afraid to work in the roles that make the money. With your compliance is great and academic advising is good and all those areas, but I think when presidents are hiring and looking, they want to know how you can make money, how marketing, fundraising. If that's not your lane, try to dabble in it at some point. Don't be afraid to branch into different areas with outside of your comfort zone. I came up through the senior women administrator route, but mine was more in the financial budgets, and I did some compliance, but I needed to do some marketing. I needed to go out and make cold calls and try to get advertisers, and they weren't fun. I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I still don't like it. It's just not my area, but I have to do it as part of my job. So, make sure you're doing those things. Don't just stay in one lane, get a bunch of different ones, and make sure that you know how to raise money for your department, because that's something that is highly regarded when you're interviewing.
Thank you, Kris. Very insightful. Lindsay, where's the media landscape going, and what does the next 5 years look like for job opportunities?
Well, I think everybody would agree that the media landscape is certainly going digital. It's probably the only way we would have survived the last couple of months, being at home and connecting with everyone via, this Zoom call is a product of that alone, and staying connected with your fans through that. Mike, if you don't mind me answering your first question when you transitioned on kind of giving advice as we close as well, I did want to give two kind of pieces of advice to young people that may be listening. One, on the professional side of asking to be in rooms that you haven't necessarily been invited. It never hurts to ask, respectfully being a part of a conversation or a room where you may need to be quiet and just listen. But several times in my previous jobs, I've been able to say, hey, I've got an MBA. I'd love to hear that negotiation or how that conversation went down, and take kind of learnings through that process. You can always, the worst case is they say, no, you can't be in the room. And then the second piece, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't use this opportunity. I'm a mother of 2 biracial children and a spouse of a Black man. And today, being able to say on this call that Black Lives Matter, and that's important. And I feel like this call, somebody years ago was fighting and saying female voices matter. And today is just a different narrative to that. But certainly, I really appreciate the sentiment that every one of the panelists talked about, with unity and listening and becoming better. And so I felt the need, at least for this platform, to make sure that I was clear in what I felt today's messaging should also include.
Thank you so much for that, Lindsay. Truly, what excites you about being and working in college athletics?
I don't know that I have anything to add after Lindsay's statement. I feel like we should end on that note. But
I love you,
playing, and plus you made me cry, so thank you. I think, I don't know if excites is the right word, but what gives me hope is that we do work in an industry that can be transformative. We can affect change, because people talk about the power of sport. It's like a golden nugget that we can't quite figure out why it's so emotional and resonates so deeply with all of us. I have been pacing myself on the Michael Jordan series, because I love basketball so much, and it's reliving my glory days, because I don't know what that is about sport, but it is so powerful. And then what we're experiencing today, the Blackout Tuesdays, everybody's on social media, and when you see the power of that, it's the people, in my view, who are most powerful with their voice are those in sport. And so that's what gives me hope. You probably saw the Big Ten Commissioner, Kevin Warren, has come out and said he thinks that forming this group that they have formed with their leaders is probably the most important thing he's going to do in his career. And when you look at what his career already has been and what his career is going to be, leading a Power 5 conference, for him to say that, and I believe he means it, that's pretty awesome. So that's what gives me hope, is all of the great people that are part of what we do and why they do it and how we're trying to do it and trying to do it better. So yes, to echo Lindsay's sentiment, we're grateful to be with you all and to spend this time.
Yes, thank you. And speaking of powerful, we're going to end it with Noreen, who, as I started before when we introduced her, an extremely powerful and respected commissioner in Division I athletics. And Noreen, we're going to give you the last word here, and then I'm just going to say one thing as it relates to future panel. But Noreen, over to you.
Well, after Julie and Lindsay, I'm not sure that I can articulate any better the position that we all have, whether you're younger, older, black, white, athlete, non-athlete, leader, follower. Sports is a forum and an opportunity for us to make a difference in lives every day. The people you work with, but more importantly, the student athletes, and mentoring them and allowing them to grow, to be contributing members of society when they leave your schools, and hopefully the community service that they've done as they are going through their sport programs and their universities, the leadership roles, and frankly, the ability to, work among it in a team already that is made up of student athletes from across the country, across the world, different backgrounds, different religions, different perspectives. I think our student athletes are so well positioned to make a difference when they go into this world. And so that's what I love about what I do, and appreciate everyone being on the call today. And let's hope we can all be better every day and be better for our student athletes and make this world a better place, because Lord knows it needs some help. So Michael, thank you for allowing us to be part of this.
Yes, and thank all of you. Great insight, perspective, and appreciate you sharing. So just to wrap up here, CSMG is going to be doing 10 of these empowerment series panels. This was number 2. In 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing one on esports. So stay tuned for the announcement there. And then in 4 weeks from now, we're going to be doing one focused on HBCU athletics and the community involvement around HBCUs. So look for the invites to tune in. Greatly appreciate it. And once again, I know everybody's on mute, but thank you to all the panelists that participated, as they deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much.